Released originally in 2001 for North America and early 2002 for Europe, and developed and published by Konami. It's Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. What you're seeing currently is the HD version of the game on PlayStation 3 released in 2011, as part of the HD Collection released as well on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation Vita, which was remastered by Bluepoint Games for the consoles, and by Armature Studio for the Vita, and overseen by Kojima Productions. This version is also primarily based off the Substance version of Metal Gear Solid 2, which was later released in 2002 for Xbox, PlayStation 2, and PC, and later in 2003 for Europe. Once again, the game was directed by Hideo Kojima and co-written by Hideo Kojima and Tomokazu Fukushima. In Metal Gear Solid 2, you play yet again as Solid Snake, for a whole 2 hours. Trying my best not to spoil anything here, things go very wrong very fast for Snake within the first act of the game. Certain old enemies make a return in the strangest way possible, and then 2 years later and we're greeted with some familiar faces, as well as Raiden.
What are you... What the...
You're a man?
Basically the new protagonist of Metal Gear Solid 2 from here on out after the first act with Snake, which revolves around the Big Shell, a massive offshore cleanup facility that has been taken over by a group of terrorists, referring to themselves as the Sons of Liberty, hence the name of the game. They're demanding a $30 billion ransom in exchange for the President of the United States, as well as plenty of hostages, and threaten to destroy the facility and create a massive environmental disaster if the demands are not met. Or so we're told at the start of the game via codec. But once again, not everything is as it seems, and the game will throw plenty of twists your way. But the campaign isn't all that Metal Gear Solid 2 features. The Substance version includes added features originally only found in the PAL and Japanese versions of the game, such as a boss survival mode, pitting you against every boss in the game basically and scoring you in the end on how well you did and how fast you beat them, as well as a theater casting mode letting you play around with different cutscenes in the games, and even swap out character models. However, Substance would also add entirely new modes, such as the VR missions, which would include 300 different types of missions, as well as 200 alternative missions set in areas taken from the game, also giving you different types of objectives to complete, as well as a Snake Tales mode, which would include 5 new story missions, non-canon of course, revolving around Solid Snake on the Big Shell. But is any of this any good? Let's find out with The Good.
What a pleasant surprise, brother.
Save it. You brother of mine.
Don't say you've forgotten me.
Snake. Snake?
Right, take cover.
Stop impersonating him.
Brother, I'm a whole different game from Liquid.
Metal Gear Solid 2 is a sequel improved upon a number of things from the original game. Probably the biggest and best improvement was the improvement of the stealth system overall. In fact, you could complete the entire game without ever once being spotted outside of a few scripted segments. New gameplay features such as non-lethal weapons aided this. Instead of snapping nets like in the previous game, you can now put guards to sleep with your tranquilizer darts with your new modified M9 pistol, as well as simply knocking guards out or completely avoiding them altogether. But not only that, bodies no longer just vanish like in previous games. You now have to be aware of the guards you knock out or tranquilize and hide their bodies to avoid detection from other guards patrolling the area. Guards themselves will also no longer immediately go into alert upon being spotted or attacked like in the previous game. They first have to radio into HQ and ask for backup. As long as you can take out the guard before he notifies HQ of your existence, no alert status will be raised. But to prevent the game from being a cakewalk, some guards for example have to radio into HQ every few minutes. If you take them out and nobody radios into HQ afterwards, they'll send an investigation team to patrol the area. But thankfully, lockers tend to solve that problem. As long as you avoid detection and the backup can't find the previous guards dead, they'll just assume they fell asleep if found sleeping, or went AWOL. Outside of stealth, Metal Gear Solid 2 has improved upon the overall gameplay as well, including the weapon system introducing the ability to aim your weapons in the first person now, as well as just adding a ton of new weapons to play around with in general. Not to mention having better controls overall from close quarter combat, to even being able to peek around corners more effectively, giving you tons of options to approach different situations. And of course, once again, the voice acting is absolutely incredible, with talent from David Hayter reprising his role as Solid Snake, as well as newcomers Quentin Flynn as Raiden and John Seaton as Solidus. And of course, with the amazing voice acting comes a pretty incredible story, but not only that, an in-depth story. One that'll definitely throw some twists your way, as I mentioned earlier, but overall still left a very mixed reaction among the Metal Gear fanbase. Some fans absolutely loved it, some hated it, many people have done retrospective videos and in-depth analysis of the story and the game overall, as it is probably one of the most convoluted stories in the series. But for me personally, I'm mixed on it, but I'll leave it at that. But probably what the Metal Gear Solid franchise does best outside of stealth are the boss fights, and Metal Gear Solid 2 in that regard does not disappoint. Once again, the boss fights in this game are absolutely incredible, except for one, which I'll get to in a moment. Everything from fighting Solidus and his Harrier with your Stinger missiles as it circles around you, to fighting probably one of my favorite Metal Gear villains, Vamp. Metal Gear Solid 2 once again has extremely outstanding boss battles that are both challenging and fun. But now let's discuss the bad.
We've managed to avoid drowning. Good job.
Now, the one boss fight that isn't all up to snuff and is probably one of the biggest disappointments in the game was the Fortune boss battle. You're greeted with this amazing cutscene of her seemingly unable to be shot at by bullet fire. Then later on you have a segment where you have to avoid her for a period of time while she shoots her railgun at you. It all seems to build towards what should and could have been probably an incredible boss battle, and instead nothing ever happens. You never truly get to fight Fortune throughout the entire game, and that's a real shame. Instead, later on, we're greeted with a scene of Snake getting ready to fight her that we never truly see. The next issue some fans had with Metal Gear Solid 2, especially back in 2001 when the game launched, was the bait and switch and reveal of Raiden as the main protagonist of the game. To really understand why, you have to actually look back at Metal Gear Solid 2's trailers and the hype building up to that point. In a time where social media was almost non-existent, Raiden was never revealed until the game's launch, and nobody suspected anything about him being the main character. Any trailer showcasing Snake and Big Shell was simply them swapping out the character model for the trailer. So when people finally got their hands on Metal Gear Solid 2, the bait and switch came as a huge surprise for many, and left a bad taste for a lot of people, myself included at the time, as Raiden at first glance seemed to be a whiny pretty boy with girl problems.
What? I can't believe this. What are you wearing?
Oh, it's a disguise.
A disguise? What kind of disguise?
Well, I was hoping I could use it kind of like camouflage. You know, fool the enemy into thinking I was a box.
You'd have to be an absolute idiot to be fooled by that.
Yeah, maybe. But there are more idiots in this world than you think.
You mean like you?
What?
Never mind. Anyway, good luck. You'll probably need it with that stupid box on your head.
And what's even worse was the outcry from fans over Raiden was so bad that in the Substance version of the game, they added a Snake Tales mode, which basically gave an alternate non-canon story, as I mentioned earlier, that instead focused on Snake being the hero of Big Shell. Except it had no voice acting, cutscenes, and overall was just really meh, and just felt really tacked on and fan-pandering by that point. But upon replaying Metal Gear Solid 2 on the HD Collection, in all honesty, I don't understand the hate Raiden got. By the end of the story, he's really fleshed out as a character, and in my opinion came into his own and gave me much more respect for him overall. But there are still people out there that don't like him much, and I can also see why. But in terms of gameplay, probably the biggest issue for me personally was the bomb disposal section of the game. At some point in the story, you'll be tasked with removing a certain amount of bombs depending on the difficulty you're playing on, and this is probably one of the most dragged out sections in the game. After all the backtracking and you finally freeze all the bombs, you're then told there is another one, and it's set to a timer and you have to make a mad dash to dispose of it. Probably my next minor issue is that the camera and the first person controls are still slightly wonky. You pretty much have to hold down square to aim your gun while you hold down R1 to aim in first person, then release square to shoot. But if you ever want to switch weapons or not shoot, it gets kind of awkward at times. But now let's discuss the ugly. where we discuss the graphics, soundtrack, and technical aspects of the game. Now, for a 2001 release, Metal Gear Solid 2 was easily one of the best looking games of its time, and it's not hard to see why. The extreme attention to detail in the environments, character models, and cutscenes were just mind-blowing, and it was a true showcase at the time of what the PlayStation 2 could accomplish. The meticulous level of detail in the tanker section of the game alone is incredible, from the rain effects outside, to being able to interact with so many things in the environments. To even slipping on bird crap on the big shell. Not to mention the fact the HD Collection remaster of the game is incredibly well done and looks and runs absolutely fantastic on the PlayStation 3. And once again, the soundtrack for this series is absolutely incredible, and easily my most favorite in video games. And Metal Gear Solid 2 in particular, in my opinion, has probably one of the best soundtracks in the series so far as of this recording. But the Phantom Pain may be a strong contender. And during my 10 to 13 hours or so I spent with Metal Gear Solid 2, I had no bugs or glitches at all or crashes during my playtime with it, so that's always a plus. Overall, Metal Gear Solid 2 is a real mixed bag for fans of the series. As I said, some fans consider it the best in the series, some even consider it the worst. The story is confusing as hell to newcomers, and it expects you to fully know and understand what transpired in the previous game, and I'm perfectly okay with this. Despite how convoluted the story can get, I still really enjoy it, and despite my issues I had with Metal Gear Solid 2, overall I still think it's a great game. I can see why some people think it's the best in the series, with its extreme attention to detail and amazing soundtrack, and I can also understand why some people don't like it as much. Me personally, I think it holds up well. It's not my favorite, but it's damn good. Metal Gear as a whole is damn good. And yeah, I have a positive bias towards the series as I mentioned in my review of the first game, so do keep that in mind. But now, it's time for the rating.
So, any codec moments from you, Snake? The first one I'm seeing is... Okay, this works. It's a great front view. Okay, what am I seeing now? You're a pretty good photographer. We can definitely use this left shot. And the next one is... This is great. The Marines lettering shows up really well. What's next? This is hilarious! This rules. But we can't use it. Get the shots we need.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Don't worry, it's a game. It's a game just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
What are you talking about?
Raiden, something happened to me last Thursday when I was driving home. I had a couple of miles to go. I looked up and saw a glowing orange object in the sky to the east. It was moving very irregularly. Suddenly, there was intense light all around me, and when I came to, I was home. What do you think happened to me?
Huh?
Fine. Forget it.